Next up is Mark Scrimshire. Mark is co-founder and CTO of MedYear, Blue Button Innovator, CMS, HHS, and Entrepreneur in Residence, New Wave Telecoms and Technologies. He's currently working with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Resources and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, building a Blue Button data API for beneficiaries. Mark?
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Hi. Can everybody hear me? Thank you, Alex. If we line up the deck. While they just line up the deck, like get the PDF going, let me tell you a little bit about what's going on here. I'm with CMS currently as an entrepreneur in residence. So I tell people I'm actually paid by the US government to cause trouble inside the US government. It's a great role. So I've spent the last 2 years at CMS working on a new Blue Button API. And the reason for the music, Firestarter, is that we're actually building that on Fhir. So let's see if we can pull up a deck because they've got a beautiful view of this jacket. So, okay, while we're going, how many developers in the audience? Come on, this is momentum, right? So this implies action. So let's see, I saw a small handful of developers. Cool, okay, pay attention. Okay, pay attention because I'm terrible at this. And there is going to be a call to action. Since it's momentum, there should be action, okay? So what we're going to talk about is APIs, apps, and the missing link that's in all this is called trust, right? This is one of the challenges that I'm certainly dealing with at CMS. First thing I have to do is to tell you I'm a quasi-fed, and so anything I say here is not an official viewpoint of CMS or HHS, right? This is my get-out-of-jail-free card. Are we all good with that? Yes? Come on, I want some audience participation here. Yes, that's it. Let's have a bit of momentum. Okay, just so you know, to be clear, I have a lot of different hats that I wear, and I was quite happily walking up and down the stairs and through the metro this morning because I'm trying to get fit for ski season. I'm a ski instructor, part-time. Doesn't pay the bills, so what I do for a living, I'm working as Blue Button Innovator. I'm employed by New Wave as an entrepreneur in residence, so as I say, I get to cause trouble. MedYear, we're building an app, but an app depends on data, right? And that's the big challenge that we're dealing with. And I got involved in all this because I started HealthCamp when I was working for a payer, because I thought there were some useful conversations we should have. So I've got to take you on a little bit of a journey and a story. So this is sort of my personal views of life inside the government as an innovator. And I'd really have to say hats off to Todd Park and Brian Sivak and Susanna Fox. Todd created the Entrepreneur in Residence program at CMS, and there's a bunch of folks like me that are doing really cool things with data all across HHS in places like CDC, FDA, and elsewhere. And it's really cool, and it's great to work with people inside the government. There's some really talented people, and we don't give them enough credit. We're always beating down on the government, but there are some amazingly dedicated people there. And so what I've been doing is working on this Blue Button on Fhir API. What I have to say to you is, as an innovator, and I class myself as a terrible developer, the technology is easy, or relatively, right? It does get challenging when you're talking about doing it for 35 million beneficiaries, so scale becomes a bit of an issue. But the real thing that you're dealing with is the policy side of things, and let me give you a bit of context. So at CMS, as a federal agency, they're actually basically prohibited from picking winners and losers, okay? So we can't show favoritism. So then you've got that at one extreme, and by that I mean CMS takes a very strong and very serious view of their responsibility as a custodian of beneficiary data. They take that very, very seriously, so they're very careful about how they let the data out. Okay, so that's one end of the swing there. At the other end, you've got the great work that the Office of Civil Rights has been doing to tell you, as consumers, that you have an absolute right to your health data, and you can send it, you can receive it whatever way you like, and send it wherever you like, right? So what I'm trying to do at CMS is navigate between those two actually sort of competing objectives. They're sort of mutually exclusive. So how can we find a way through that? And it's balancing those responsibilities against the freedom of choice. And, you know, if I say something that's maybe not politically correct, basically you've got people at CMS that do not want to be hauled up in front of Congress to say, why did you let that data go to pick a country, Russia or China, right? Right, so it's a really serious problem. So let's see if we can get the... Did I say earlier technology is easy? Can somebody advance the slide? So we're dealing with navigating the policy, and I love this. You can tell this is Monday morning. Can you advance this? Just hit the down arrow, or... We did test this earlier, didn't we? Come on. Okay. Never mind. I'm sure I can remember what I said. So, what we're trying to do, what I've been doing is building this blue button. And so I was brought in with this task of basically reinventing Blue Button. Who's actually heard of Blue Button? Here's another audience. This is good. This is good. Okay. Who's actually used Blue Button? See, my work is not yet done. Right? Brilliant. Thank you. But between the VA and CMS, and there's a bit of stuff going on at the DoD, there's been 3.6 million beneficiaries and veterans that have downloaded their Blue Button data. We're in a race with the VA. They're just fractionally ahead of us. We're about 1.5 something million. It's going up every month. And this is since 2010. And what I say about Blue Button is it was an essential first step. I describe it as absolutely brilliant and absolutely awful. And any of you developers that have spent time trying to parse a Blue Button text file, A, everyone's different, and B, I remember losing weeks trying to work that out. I told you I'm a bad developer. But it was a brilliant first step. So when I was looking around to take Blue Button forward, I'm lazy. And so why invent our own API? And CMS has got lots of APIs. They're probably better known as comma-separated variable files, you know, things you pull into Excel. But we need something better. And there's been a lot going on in the Fhir community. Who's heard of Fhir? Okay, cool. Okay, I have this belief that they named it Fhir so that when you go talk to people and they say, what about this Fhir stuff? You know they don't know what they're talking about, right? So I think that was a brilliant choice on behalf of Graham Grieve there. But they're doing some really great work. And we've been working with the Fhir community, and we've helped define some of the standards because I didn't want to do too much work in where I had to put data. So we defined an explanation of benefit resource that is being used by other payers in the industry now, so that's really cool. But that's basically an API, and it's structured data. And when we set out with our Blue Button vision, it was to build a developer-friendly, standards-based data API that enables beneficiaries to connect their data to the applications, services, and research programs they trust. Really simple there. Easy to say, not so easy to build, but that's it. So what I think is happening in the industry is we're seeing this growth in APIs. If you're using wearables, and we've probably got a few folks building wearables, there's APIs cropping up everywhere. And if we're not careful, we're going to be in the same boat we are with Blue Button text files of everyone's different. So can we get some commonality? The other thing is, again, I go back to the start of this talk, the missing link is trust. And the key is, who do you trust giving those developer keys to. So this is one of the big issues that we're grappling with at CMS, is that, yes, we can use an API like Fhir, and if you look at all the work that's going on with Fhir, there's some great work going on, but usually what they do is they set aside the security piece and say, let's just see if we can get data flowing. Well, that's okay, that's good. But when you're releasing real data into the real world, you've got to have security. Okay, well, the good part is that they've actually basically saying in the Fhir world, let's use OAuth. And if you're not a developer and you don't know what OAuth is, it's the authorization piece, and you probably recognize it because you've got a smartphone app and you've connected it to Facebook, and it said, do you want to let it post to your timeline, right? That whole process is basically OAuth, right? And it's used by any of the big web properties. And Fhir is basically being built to use that as well. So the advantage is it's been proven, it's used billions of times a day across the web, and it's been built into Fhir. But the secret is that every developer that develops an app that uses OAuth has to be given a set of keys. Well, how do you know you can trust that developer? That's the big question, right? So how do we build this trust? And we need to deal with this on behalf of beneficiaries. How does a beneficiary, how does a consumer know whether to trust that app, or know whether it's actually going to be sending their data to some marketing agency or to some Russian hacker or Chinese hacker or whatever, without them knowing? Now, come back to what the Office of Civil Rights says. I can knowingly choose to send my data to a Russian hacker if I want. There is nothing against HIPAA to stop me doing that. I am allowed to do that. The question is, do I know about it, right? So how do we deal with trust? And if we're not careful, okay, this is where you guys, I use guys in the generic sense, okay? This is where, if we are not careful as developers, we face a really bleak future, because the Office of Civil Rights can come in and audit a data holder about how they're letting data out, okay? So every general counsel sitting in a hospital is going to be really careful about who they're going to connect to, okay? So if we're not careful, every hospital, every major API, whether it's from different EMR vendors, is probably going to have a slightly different way of you proving you are a good player, okay? And so your life is going to be a mountain of potential paperwork, because this is healthcare and very little of it has really been digitized, right? So you'll do this lots and lots of times, and everyone will be subtly different. So we really need to try and step up and solve this problem together. And I actually, a few weeks ago, I actually said to Vindell Washington, the new head of the ONC, what can you do in your last sort of 70 days in office to move this forward? And that doesn't mean go create a standard, because we know healthcare, that takes years, right? And when we get it, it's so damn complicated, pardon my French, that it's too hard to use. So we really need to come together and try and help solve this. So that's my call to action to you. One of the things I did to try and kick that forward is I actually put out an API. You can go to GitHub, go to HHS Idea Lab, that's the innovation group that I'm in at HHS, and there's a little thing in there called POET, Pre-OAuth Entity Trust API. And we try to put this out there saying, is this a way that that applications could come and say, I'm known over there by somebody who's endorsed them? And a colleague of mine then went and wrote a reference implementation. So we actually have poetry, which is really good. You have to have a good acronym, right, for any API. So we're trying to encourage this to be something that is open, but we need to work together to try and solve this. Otherwise, we're going to end up with something too complicated, and it's going to take too long to get implemented. And the reason we need to do this is it's a win for everyone. If we get this right, if we can create that ecosystem of trust, then consumers win, because we as consumers have a better frame of reference for choosing apps and picking good ones from bad ones. It makes sense for us as developers. Again, I'm lazy. If I can do something and get through a lot of those checks in the same way by doing something once instead of doing it 50 times, that's a good thing. I mean, if you think about the way we've built the internet, You know, we do not go and handcraft our SSL certificates to get that little lock in our browser, do we? You know, you go and pay your $70 or whatever to one of those agencies to get a certificate. We need to make it simpler than that if we can. And it's also a benefit for those data holders, because if they've got a consistent way of saying, you are known, I can trust you, then they have to do fewer checks. That's a win. It makes it more efficient to connect data. So that's my call to action to you. Watch out for what is going on. Get involved in the Fhir community. There's a lot going on there. Watch out for things like Poet. You might also search for things like Trust Harbor out of the National Association for Trusted Exchange. There's a lot of good stuff that we're trying to push forward. If you want to know more, you can reach me in these ways. My Twitter handle, my email. Maybe I'll even blog occasionally when I'm not busy. And if you want to find out more about Blue Button, go to go.cms.gov/bluebutton, and you can get on the mailing list there. And with that, I think it's time to hand over back to Alex.
All right. Big round of applause for Mark Scrimshire. Thank you, Mark.